And now, actually, before they share the screen, so I'm going to mute all. If anyone would like to share, speak, ask, whatever, please do. Just have to unmute yourselves.
Jane's got a hand up already.
Jane has got her hand up. No. Okay. So, in the flow of the Torah portions, we are yesterday in synagogues around the world, we read about the giving of the Torah, the experience at Mount Sinai, where God spoke to the Jews and gave them the Torah. This coming week, and what we're going to look at today, is the Torah portion is called Mishpatim. It means statutes. And the Torah pretty much dives straight into laws. It's a smattering of 24 different mitzvahs, some positive commandments, some prohibitions. And the predominance of they're much more, they're like what we would call civil laws, damages. There's very little ritual or religious on the face of it, of what we read this week. It's much more the interpersonal, societal, neighbor to neighbor laws. And we're going to talk about one of those laws. And I just want to give some preface, because it's a great lesson, but I feel that it needs some preliminary talk. First of all, when it comes to laws of the Torah, there's an underlying theme. Obviously, we have responsibility to God and to humanity, all of humanity. But then there's a theme of special responsibility to our fellow Jews as family. So if I had to break down, and that's what I say, look at the world, I see the world as friends and family. My Catholic neighbors, my Muslim neighbors, my Hindu neighbors, whoever they are my community, they're my friends. And at the end of the day, though, there are my Jews are my family. And it's not, in a world and a society which, thank God, really promotes the idea of equality for all and care for all and respect to all, to differentiate sounds a little funny, because don't we do good for everyone? We do good for everyone, but I take care of my family. So while I want to do good for everyone, irrespective of religion or so on, if Malky calls me, she's in New York now, and she asked me to run over to Summit, I'm going to do that. Someone else calls me to ask me to run over Summit, depends what's necessary. It depends if it's an emergency. It's not so simple. Just to pick up a package for my family, I'll do it. It's different. I think that's a normative and understood. One example, which is also in the sixth Torah portion, but we're not going to be talking about it, is lending money. The prohibition to take interest in lending money. Lending money is not an evil thing. You serious? Taking unfair advantage of a vulnerable person who needs money, that's unfair. But if my money, if I lend $1,000 to someone else because they need it, well, that $1,000 could be earning money by me. So here it's not just I help someone, I lost. So if someone comes along and says, something, I'm in a tough spot, can you lend me $1,000 until April 1st? I'd probably say I don't have it, because that's the truth. But if I did, so if for me to say, again, it's $1,000, but it would not be, I don't think, unfair or wrong or immoral for me to say, when you give it back, I'm thinking about what I could get. Give me 1,002 or 1,003 or whatever it is. You're not getting much out of a bank. Maybe today everything's skyrocketed. I don't know, but it's okay to make money on your money. The Torah says don't make money on lending money to your family, which is pretty crazy. So there are definitely areas in Jewish law where you can structure a loan from one Jew to another as a business deal, and obviously there are banks in Israel who are all doing loans and mortgages, and people need mortgages, people need the loans. You're doing a favor to the borrower, you're doing a favor, and the lenders get making money. It's all within the structure of a business deal. But here, if what the Torah would say is if one of you here said to me, if you lend me $1,000, I would not be allowed to say, give me 1,001 back.
Yeah, but I think what they're really doing is extending the concept of a loan to a mitzvah.
Fair enough. It is a mitzvah, but yes, I'll agree with that. But the idea is it's trying to drive home, not that we're doing something bad for a non-Jew and we're charging interest. There's nothing wrong with charging interest. You're not allowed to charge a non-Jew usurious interest. But there's baseline, being a mensch to everybody, and then something special for family. That if one of you wants if I'm going to lend you $1,000, I'm going to do something crazy, which is I'm going to give it $1,000 without asking for even a nickel of interest. Now, there is also, I think it's fair to bear in mind, since we're talking about through the scope of Jewish law, and even starting from the Torah, there is a reality which was experienced by the Jews for thousands of years, and I would say in the United States, thank God, that's not, at least has not been my experience, which is that non-Jews hated them and wanted to kill them. As a matter of fact, in the Code of Jewish Law, it says don't, as a law, as advice, don't go to a non-Jewish barber, because why would you put yourself in a position with someone with a blade when they want to kill you? I've had mostly non-Jewish barbers my entire life, and and my father used to bring us all to a German barber. We don't know what he did before he got here, but he was the assumption is that that's a societally influenced law, and the goyim, there are definitely anti-Semites out there. But I don't assume that if I meet a non-Jew, they want to kill me. But that was for a long time. So in Jewish law, there are a couple of themes there. First of all, there's the baseline being a mensch to everyone, irrespective of background, religion, anything. And then something special for our fellow Jews who we see as family. And then there's also a certain amount of suspicion sometimes about what the non-Jew wants to do to me. Again, I wouldn't say in the United States, but it's found in Jewish law. So the mitzvah that we're going to focus on today in this week's Torah portion has to do with, if I see, the Torah says, if you see your enemy's donkey and it's overloaded, it needs to be shifted. You need to proactively go stop and help the person. Now, there too, you're going somewhere, you got a meeting to go to, someone's got a donkey, let them call AAA for donkeys. There's a problem there. Why is it everyone's problem? Like, do I stop for everyone on the highway? The thing is that what the Torah says is talking about with fellow Jews, and we go special. And therefore, there is a mitzvah to try to stop and help the person unload, reshift it. Now, just an aside, if the donkey itself seems to be suffering, it doesn't make a difference who owns the donkey. We have a mitzvah of caring for an animal's pain. We're not talking about that. We're talking about really it's the owner, the person who's dealing with it, that we stop. We stop our business. The Torah says, as one of the commandments, you have to stop where you're going, or either call someone else to help, but just don't be blind to the problem of your family member who has this. Now that as you're going to see, that actually applies specifically more for Jews. We do it for family. I want, like I say, I'll stop if I see certain people on the side of the road, but I can't. I don't work for AAA myself. I'm not going to. I don't always, when I'm driving on the highway and someone's in need, I don't always stop off and help them change a tire because I'm not that much help anyway. But at least if it was someone who I know, or actually, to be frank, someone who's obviously Jewish, I may stop by and say, today with cell phones, everybody's got someone to call, but I would make sure they're okay. That's not to mean I discriminate against someone else. It's just that we go out of our way for family. In that sense, in Jewish law, interestingly enough, even given the feelings of which are kind of alien to me because I didn't grow up being suspicious of non-Jews trying to kill me, thank God. But even given that's very persistent for thousands of years, that feeling, the rabbis said that it's not wise to make such distinctions in society because it can increase the resentments and the anti-Semitism. So even though it's not necessary biblically to stop and help the donkeys struggle, unless it's a fellow Jew, the rabbi said do it anyway, because it's not. We don't need to make those distinctions. We're talking about the time when it's under the Romans when they were all wanted to kill us. So that's a mitzvah. We're going to talk about that mitzvah. We're actually not going to talk that much about the mitzvah. I spoke more about that mitzvah now probably than we're going to do for the rest of this. It's an entryway, because in a lot of the spiritual writings, they will take something that's on its face, something like helping someone's donkey, and look for spiritual hints and allusions and lessons that can be found within them. Allusions as an ALL, what it would be alluding to. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on. What we're going to be focusing on today is the Torah perspective to dealing with our physical needs, our bodies. Because to be healthy, right? But those who tend to be more spiritually inclined, and also for thousands of years, and certainly not just Jews, tend to see the physical appetites and urges as being a distraction to the spiritual journey. And so obviously you see in Catholicism, from what I can see, you have celibacy as an ideal, and fasting, because that's a way, the physicality is an anvil around the neck. In Judaism, we don't have that. But even within Judaism, historically, there definitely has been a focus on the idea of keeping our physical needs at bay and minimized to leave room for the spiritual. In the Hasidic world, we kind of flip the script on that, and that's what we're going to talk about now. The insights we have from this law about the donkey, and some of the journey of how Judaism has seen, and how in the Hasidic world we see the idea of just taking care of ourselves, exercising, watching our weight, watching our cholesterol, all of those things, eating a good meal. Okay, so this starts off with, if you don't mind now, we'll hand over the reins to David. Okay. Text 1.
96.
Oh, yes, sorry. 98. Yeah, I skipped over there. Okay. Verse in this week's Torah portion. So when you see your enemy's donkey lying under his burden, by the way, this means your Jewish enemy, would you refrain from helping him? You should surely help along with him. Now, right off the bat, we get a thought from the founder of the Hasidic revolution. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. And he looks at this law, and the law is what the law is, but he wants to find a spiritual message in reading it in a different key. And he finds that in the term of the Hebrew word for donkey, which is chamor, it is very closely, I guess, a homonym with chomer, which means like the stuff, like the physical stuff. And he says this talks about us the struggling with the body, not with the donkey struggling, but struggling with the body. He in text 2 he says this, a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The verse states, when you see the donkey chamor, what do you mean? So in other words, you're looking at a chamor, you're looking at a donkey. He says, no, actually what it means is when you look at your own chamor, you look at your own donkey, you don't look at your own chomer, your body. When you would carefully inspect your body, when you look at your own physicality, you look at your where your impulses take you, you will see it's of your enemy, one who hates you. It hates the soul that longs for godliness and spirituality. The body in and of itself, the bodily needs, would be very often on the other side, adversarial to the things that bring us to godliness and spirituality. What's more, you will see that it is lying under its burden. What does lying under its burden mean? God intended that the body be refined by studying Torah and observing mitzvahs, but is lax in fulfilling its task. So in other words, its burden is doing the right thing, and your donkey's struggling. I don't want to do that. I'd rather have a hot dog. And hence, you might think the Baal Shem Tov coming in his place in history in the 1600s, given how observant Jews have thought for millennia, you might think that you should refrain from helping him. You should not support your body. Refrain from helping it to fulfill its mission. Instead, mortify yourself to break the body's material tendencies. There were even great Jews and Jewish communities for many, many centuries or millennia, where fasting was a big deal. People would roll in the snow. To be able to break their own sense of sensitivities, of physical sensitivities, and be able to rise above it. Ascetic. So the Rabbi, the Baal Shem Tov is saying is, you might say, listen, my body, look at my body, it's lazy, it doesn't cooperate with my soul. I'm going to break the body's material tendencies. However, says the Baal Shem Tov, this is not the proper way to reach the light of Torah. Torah does not come through breaking our body. Instead, you shall surely help it. Don't break your body, refine your body. By refining and purifying your body rather than breaking it through self-affliction. Our body is holy. Our body is valuable. We need our bodies to be able to do mitzvahs. So what he's saying is, don't break your body, guide it. Harness your bodily impulses. And just going away from this for a second, someone who likes different foods that are not healthy for them, in my experience, my personal experience, but just I also want to see from talking to other people, maybe it's when you get to a certain age or get to a certain stage, or a doctor said something, you can actually start to like things. Not just you're forced to eat the broccoli, but it's actually it tastes good because you're reframing it and you refined your taste buds. It's possible to shift ourselves. That it's not that I'm fighting my body every time I eat, but I train and I get pleasure in eating things that are healthy for me that maybe I wouldn't want to touch 20 years ago. It's been known to happen. It's not a bad thing. So, and in text 3 on 100, we find a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov's primary student, who was the teacher of the founder of Chabad. His name is Rabbi Dovber of Mezrich. This is a teaching. There's a teaching from the Maggid of Mezrich, the preacher of Mezrich. His name is Rabbi Dovber. He taught to his son, who was known as Rabbi Abraham the Angel. He was known as the Angel because he was someone who kind of stayed away as much as he could from physicality. He didn't eat much and so on. And his father said to him, "Be careful with your bodily health. Even the slightest hole in the body creates a gaping hole in the soul." This is a Hasidic Yiddish expression, that a little hole in the body is a great hole in the soul. What does that mean? It means that we should have a spiritual perspective and value for our body and engage. We're made up of body and soul. So we shouldn't be fighting one against the other. We should be engaging the body. And what Rabbi Dolber was saying was that when you can't see that, you're missing something in your spiritual perspective. If you're seeing the body as unimportant, and where there's a small hole in the body, you care about it and take care of it. And when you take care of it, you take care of your soul too. So this was a revolution. It was because we're going to nibble at some of the history. That wasn't necessarily the way spiritual people saw spiritual Jews, great rabbis we respect until today, how they saw things. Now, how did they see things? We always took care of ourselves. You look at text 4, Maimonides writes very clearly that maintaining a healthy and sound body is among the ways of God. For what cannot understand or have any knowledge of the Creator if he is ill. Therefore, a person must avoid that which harms the body and accustom themselves to that which is healthful and helps the body become stronger. So Maimonides sets as a standard, we have to keep our bodies healthy. As we're going to see, there seemed to be, even though no one argued with Maimonides, there seemed to be also a struggle with trying to tame the body and even break it. And we're going to use the donkey law as a springboard to that conversation, even though it's reading in a different key. And this is an exploration that the Rebbe once did. And let's do it on 101. On the verse in this week's Torah portion that I mentioned before about the donkey, Rashi, who's the primary commentary, he notes that the language, we don't have to go back, but the language is actually a little funny. The language is, if you see your enemies, just the strict Hebrew language, if you see your enemy's donkey struggling and you refrain from helping him. Actually, you don't want to refrain, you want to help him. Why? So there's two ways. It's one way of reading is, would you refrain from helping him? That's like a rhetorical question. Or we learn something specifically from that language that you refrain from helping. Let's look at Rashi. Would you refrain from helping your enemy? You surely help along with him. These words are a question. We perhaps say so. So in other words, he says, no, it doesn't say you refrain from helping. It says, would you? It's rhetorical. Obviously, you don't. But midrashically, our rabbis interpreted the verse as follows. If you see, you actually sometimes may refrain. Sometimes it's okay to refrain. Then this means that sometimes you may indeed refrain from helping someone, and sometimes you must help. How so? Remember, this is not just we're being, I hate to use the term Good Samaritan, but we're just being a nice person going, sometimes it's a mitzvah to do it. Even if you're busy, it's a mitzvah to do it, but sometimes it's not. When is that? How so? Here's an example. An elder for whom it's beneath his dignity to unload a donkey. You know, if my father's walking down the way, he's 88 years old, his walking is not great, his strength is not great. Wait for the next person to help the donkey. You're not going to be too much help. And you know something, it's okay. And the law allows for that. You may refrain. Or it says if the animal belongs to a Gentile and the burden belongs to a Jew, you may refrain. As I said before, this is more specific as this is how we do for the family. So there in the Midrashic Talmudic thing, what happens if the burden belongs to a Jew, the animal belongs to a Gentile, the animal belongs to a Jew, the burden belongs to a Gentile. But the point is that if it's not really my family, so then technically I don't have to. As I told you, the rabbi said, smart, help everybody, even if it's beyond the letter of the law. But we're talking about within the law, the person's allowed to refrain. It's like, right? And technically, I guess we could not charge interest to our non-Jewish neighbors also. So it's up to you. But the idea is that there's special laws for family. So I mentioned before about the interest. If you look at text 5b, this comes from the Medrash, and it gives us a third possibility of when you can refrain. So there was one is a person, an elderly person, a person of dignity, they don't have to go and unload the donkey. This we hear it was belonged to a Gentile. Or 5b is you would refrain from helping. There are instances when you indeed do refrain. How so? If the animal were in a cemetery, a Kohen must not become impure to help it. In Torah, and this is a little bit relevant for later also, so we'll expand a little bit more on this. In Torah thinking, and I've been speaking a lot about it on Tuesday, women's class, the Torah, even though death is a part of life, and going to a funeral is an important thing, and caring for the dead is a huge mitzvah, a Kohen, who is a human representative of the divine, and God represents life, and the whole idea of death in the world comes about because of looking at the Torah through the mistake in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. So therefore, a Kohen is not supposed to go to a cemetery, not supposed to be part of it, except for immediate family. A Kohen doesn't interact with them. For me to do it, it's an honor, it's a mitzvah, it's very important. I'm not swallowing anything to do it, but a Kohen doesn't do it because they're at a different plane. So now a Kohen is walking by a cemetery, and he sees someone in the cemetery struggling. Their donkey struggling with a thing. Their neighbor Yankel who's not a Kohen and he's in a cemetery, but he went in there with his donkey and the load and they're struggling. Kohen doesn't go because he has competing values now. He has a mitzvah to help someone struggling, but he also has a mitzvah not to go into a cemetery, and therefore it says for him, that's the reading of refrain from helping applies to that. So we have three different types. We have the person who their age or dignity it's inappropriate, doesn't belong to a Jew, or the Kohen. Rashi only brings two of those three. This 5b is from the Medrash, but it's not mentioned by Rashi. So the Rabbi does an analysis of that, but we're not going to get into much of that analysis. But it is an insight that we can look at Rashi hinting at different elements of how we deal with fasting or caring for our physical bodies. So now let's go to text 6:103, and let's look at Jewish law. Jewish law tells us, we saw that Maimonides says, take care of your body. In text 6, we say a person does not have ownership over their body to maim, shame, or pain it in any way, including denying the body of food and drink. Theologically, I can't say it's my body. I'm going to cut myself. You could say that, but it's not my body. It's God gave me the body to care for, and therefore I don't have the right to hurt my body. And he says that includes denying the body of food and drink. So, on the face of it, fasting is not a good thing. Now, as we're going to see, fasting was a very big deal for a very long time, not just in Kippur. Voluntary fasting was for spiritual people. That was a way of humbling themselves and getting into getting a grip on their own physical needs. I know that some people here have told me they fast to detoxify, and I wouldn't do it myself because I don't like fasting, but that's a voluntary fasting for physical needs. Makes sense to me. So they wanted to spiritually detoxify. Maybe they wanted to maybe they felt that they were engaging too much in the physical, but this is going on for thousands of years. Here, Jewish law says you don't have a right to just deny your body. The only time this would be acceptable is if one does so for the purposes of repentance, teshuva. For in such a case, the pain endured by the body is actually a favor, for it saves their soul from spiritual death. When a person we see our souls as we have to care for our souls, we have to care for our bodies. And whenever we do something, it makes an impact on our soul. And most people spend most of the day doing good stuff, or at least neutral stuff, but it all impacts the soul, and especially with the mistakes we make. So if I did something and I hurt someone's feelings in a serious way this morning, I should deal with it now. I call them, apologize, think it through, but I may feel horrible about it. Why did I do that? It's possible that someone would say, I want to fast and really, in a way, afflict myself because I want to drive home what I did, and I want to be able to find cleansing from this. So the fasting is actually a favor to me because I need it. I'm disturbed. As a matter of fact, one's not allowed to fast on Shabbos, except when one feels so disturbed by something that the fasting is going to bring them pleasure, because it's a physical discomfort, but emotional and spiritual discomfort could be even worse. So you want it sometimes if you see fasting as an antidote, it's a favor. So you're not afflicting so much. You're afflicting the body, but you're not afflicting yourself. So this is in Jewish law. Say the only time it's okay to do a voluntary fast is if it's something where I think I'm cleansing my soul. By the same token, one may fast for any teshuva-related purpose, even if they're not physically fit to do so. By contrast, one who is physically fit may fast even if it isn't a teshuva-related circumstance, because they're doing so to cleanse their soul before God, for there is no greater favor than this. Person feels, I didn't do something wrong. I'm just feeling, I want to get closer to God. I want to get closer to my soul. I want to be less focused on my lunch. And I want to fast. It's going to make me feel better. Jewish law says, okay, if it makes you feel better, if it's not to break the body, you can do it. Yeah.
Even if they're not physically fit to do so.
Right. So that's quite one's not allowed to do something to harm their health. What it means there is that they're not, say, my father, I didn't want him to fast Yom Kippur. The doctor told him, I wouldn't advise it, but it's not that you can't. He wasn't physically fit to do so. That's what we're talking about. Where it's not, obviously, if the person is gonna keel over, they're not allowed to do that. But it's not, they're not in good shape, so you're not doing it. But the person really wants to fast. Because emotionally they feel they need it, so we're gonna allow it. Now, here if you look at 7a, the early ethical works, chief among them, the Rokeach. I don't know if you've heard of them, but he was a great in Germany in the 12 and 1300s. There was a very spiritual movement. They were known actually as Hasidim, nothing to do with the Hasidim of today. Hasidim just means pious. They were called Hasidei Ashkenaz, the pious of Germany. And they were very into this the asceticism and self-mortification and so on. And they were great people. Chief Rabbi Lezer of Worms of 13th century Germany and Sefer Hasidim from Yehuda Chassid of 12th century Germany speak of many fasts and other afflictions for those who commit serious sins. The purpose of such behavior is to be spared from suffering punishment in the world to come, God forbid. It is also intended to speed up the process of cleansing the soul, because when our souls leave our body when we pass away, there's a cleansing process, and whatever we didn't deal with while we're alive, and they're trying to deal with it while they're alive. It is also possible that the person is unable to return to God wholeheartedly out of love, so they must resort to fear. They can't get it to fear. It doesn't mean fear. It means something more like a feeling of brokenness and distance from God. So this is what they used to do, and that was it was a common thing. And in 7b, we find that after one has done tshuva for their sin, one has repented. There's still another step to gain which is to gain favor and be as cherished before God as they were prior to sinning. Actually, just see. I guess I can't see if anyone's raising their hand here. Let me just check that. No, I just wanted to make sure that we were missing any questions. Okay. Right? Yeah. To accomplish this in temple times, a person was required to bring a burnt offering. As our sages expounded in the Medrash on the verse, it will be accepted for him. This sacrifice was like an appeasement offering after one did tshuva, but in other words, repentant and was completely absolved from punishment. It is akin to someone who disobeyed the king, secured forgiveness through the intervention of a helpful minister. And still, the perpetrator will send an appeasement offering to curry favor and once again get an audience with the king. Someone, again, I heard someone's feelings this morning, God forbid, in a serious way, and I apologize. The person says, I understand, apology accepted. Still send chocolates. Putting on top of something. So here we say, even if a person, I sat in prayer and I put myself before God, but I want to do something just to make sure we're good. And now that we no longer have the option of offering a sacrifice to appease, fasting takes its place. So that was a spiritual perspective, and from Kabbalists too. Actually, we've been finished. Actually, 106. Based on this, and according to Kabbalah, the Arizal of Yitzchak Luria, he taught his students the appropriate number of fasts one should undergo for various sins, even less severe ones. For example, 151 fasts for getting angry. Yeah.
I know people who would never read again.
But this is true. They were giving primacy to the soul over the body, and they recognized that sometimes our self-indulgence and our engagement with the physical distracts us, and therefore let's minimize it, let's subdue it, and fasting was a pretty common thing. Using that model, the Rebbe looked at these two, the Rashis, the deal with struggling with again, it's the model that existed up until the Baal Shem Tov. But he looks at what the Torah says about struggling with the donkey, and the donkey represents our own body. Fasting as a form of teshuvah is typically done when trying to do teshuvah for an actual sin. Rashi alludes to this scenario with the case of a non-Jewish animal saddled with a Jewish soul, the Jewish load. When a Jew sins, God forbid, their body and animal souls are ripped away from holiness and are temporarily inducted into the clutches of ego and negativity. In other words, became like the animal of a non-Jew. When we say a non-Jewish animal saddled with a Jewish load, he says that's a metaphor. That there's the animal, and here we say it's outside the sphere of my holiness. It's a non-Jewish animal. That's as Rashi brought it. That's something where I look and say, I need to struggle with this. I need to, and therefore that was when people would fast. Now, what's important, if you look in text 9a, we never see the soul as ultimately saddled with the corrupted. Resh Lakish said, it says in the Talmud, with regard to the sinners of the Jewish people, the fire of Gehenna, which means of purgatory, has no power over them. They are filled with good deeds like a pomegranate. So all of us, yes, even not the best of us, we're doing good stuff. And in 9b, it says, even during the moment of sin, a Jew remains completely faithful to God, it could be subconscious. So the body swerves from Torah. This donkey swerves from Torah, and people are ethicists for all these years. They're trying to get the donkey under control, and that's the example Rashi brings with the Jewish owned, non-Jewish owned donkey, and that's how the fasting comes into play. How about the other example of an elder who's just not respectful for them to go and or impossible perhaps to unload. Text 10 says, Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, an elder, the Hebrew for elder, it hints at the idea of nothing other than one who has acquired wisdom, person of great of spiritual stature. But they maybe they just realized, I'm not paying enough attention to my body, to my appetites, to my eating, and therefore I want to fast to be able to get a grip. So there are these two possibilities, which historically, that's why we would fast, and why, even though we do take care of our bodies, Maimonides tells us, and Jewish law tells us, it's okay sometimes to fast. What about the third option that the Medrash brings, but Rashi doesn't bring, about the Kohen in the cemetery? Why doesn't that fit into this whole equation the way it's being framed? In text 11, we can now understand why, metaphorically speaking, Rashi chose not to cite the example of the Kohen in a cemetery. Spiritually speaking, what this represents is this: an animal may be in the cemetery, for through sin, the body and animal soul descend into a dark place of death and impurity. However, a Jew's soul always retains her status as a Kohen, namely apart and above that dark place of death and impurity. Spiritually speaking, there's really no such thing as being in a cemetery. Even a Jew's body is eternal and cannot be truly lost to negative forces. The only possible scenario is that the body is temporarily under non-Jewish ownership, like that's the donkey, but doesn't go in actual change. It remains a Jewish body. So to suggest that a Jewish body should actually fall into place of darkness and death, a cemetery, this is impossible. So I want to keep the metaphors kind of clear. Judaism sees everybody as created for a purpose, and everybody has something to contribute to the world. We have a special gift and burden and responsibility of mitzvahs, and our bodies are designed for that, and our souls are designed for that. For the idea of my non-Jewish neighbor, who's, from what I can tell, they're really nice people. There's nothing evil about them, and but they don't have the charge and the mission of doing mitzvahs like I do, and therefore, the imagery of my donkey is meaning a donkey that is within the sphere of being used for mitzvahs for that holy purpose. My neighbor's donkey, so a meaningful purpose, but it's not within that Torah sphere of mitzvahs. And therefore, the metaphor here is that as the Rebbe is putting it, that for us, our physicality is holy. We treat the body as a holy article. It's not just the physical tool of a holy soul. And therefore, even the idea of saying that it's a donkey in a cemetery, totally in an atmosphere of death, that was too uncomfortable for Rashi to bring. But now let's shift back to the real conversation here, which is, what do we do? What do you do about fasting? Fasting was done. Fasting was done by really good people, even though Maimonides said we have to take care of our bodies. And we see that even Rashi kind of hints at it from this perspective. Well, with the Hasidic revolution, this changed. Text 12. All of this fasting is only advisable for a strong, healthy person for whom it won't pose a health risk as it was in generations past. The assumption is, looking at Talmudic literature and the history, that the human constitutions have changed somewhat. I can tell you that even my grandparents' generation, or when I went to Russia and I saw how people live. For a pampered kid from West Orange, I didn't know how they were surviving. We have different norms. in times of the Talmud, it seems like fasting was for them kind of like us pushing off breakfast. They did it. They did it off 151 fasts because you lost your temper. It's crazy, right? But the thing is that it was done. But that was in generations past. However, if many fasts will be detrimental to one's health and even cause sickness, as it is with most people today, fasting is no longer allowed. So this is the founder of Chabad saying, we don't do that. We fast, Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, whenever the Torah says fast, you gotta fast. Yeah, okay, we're not in management. The Torah says it, we do it. We don't do voluntary fasting. It's not a Torah thing. Again, someone's doing a detox, I'm not messing with that. But generally, it's not, you have to be careful with that. Don't do it to break the body. A person is not allowed to bend their body to such a degree, and one who does so is called a sinner in the first chapter of the tractate Tainit in the Talmud. What then should a person do? First advice is remove your sins with charity, as the halachic commentators advise. Charities, we're giving something of our own, and by giving something that could buy us pleasures, and we're giving it away, so that's like giving away our pleasure. In text 13a, a simple reading the Alter Rebbe's words of the founder of Chabad, his words in Tanya, leads to understanding, this is from the Rebbe, that in our current times when fasting is unhealthy, we miss out on whatever could have been accomplished through fasting. So in other words, you might think, okay, so the previous generations were more advanced than us. They were able to accomplish what fasting can accomplish. While it's true that the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Zalman, does suggest giving charity, still charity doesn't seem to achieve the same thing that fasting would have achieved. It's not this internal dynamic. But this is not the case. It is axiomatic to Judaism that God continuously creates the world. Now, inasmuch as the purpose of creation is for the Jewish people in the Torah, it's impossible to suggest that something naturally gets in the way of fulfilling a Torah matter. It's unfeasible that God would create a natural phenomenon that would not allow a person, despite their best efforts, to achieve appeasement with God after they have sinned. Now, so what he's saying, what the Rebbe is saying is, I believe in God, and God creates the world. So whatever the people were able to accomplish through fasting 500 years ago, we have to be able to accomplish that not through fasting. Now, the demonstrable reason why we no longer fast today is because it's unhealthy to do so. Still, the very fact that God created a reality in which our modern bodies are no longer able to tolerate fasting proves that we don't need to fast. It proves that the opportunity to curry favor in God's eyes and restore our grace, as it was prior to sin, that in times past was accomplished by fasting, in our era just prior to Mashiach, can be accomplished with fewer fasts and with charity instead. And the Rebbe continues in 13b, we can apply the same logic to those who are unable to donate large sums to charity. Inasmuch as heaven has ordained their financial situation, it proves they don't need to give such large donation. We just give of ourselves. Some people can't give anything; they give of their effort. So, what the Rebbe is saying is that, and this is something we heard from the Rebbe a lot, because he himself lived through difficult times, and came to this country, and here we were able to live in comfort. And he used to say that, we accomplished a lot through the pain of generations, but we're done with the pain model. Now we have to be able to serve God and accomplish without the pain, with finding, not with self-indulgence, but a more comfortable way and through joy. And in text 14, notwithstanding the fact that one is halachically allowed to fast for the sake of teshuvah, repentance, the Alter Rebbe insists in Tanya that in our generation, we're not supposed to fast too much, even for teshuvah. Our generation has been empowered to rectify all negativity in a day that's free of any pain or worry, rather suffused with only joy and positivity. Here, let's stop actually, no, let's stop the show yet. The key points is Judaism has always maintained that one be mindful of their health so they can properly serve God. Next one is that said in previous generations, it was assumed that for additional piety, one could and even should distress their body. The third is halacha forbids explicitly harming the body and needlessly fasting. Before there are two exceptions when an excess fasting is allowed. One is for teshuvah, and B is to draw closer to God. The Baal Shem Tov changed this attitude, teaching that we must always work with the body, not against it. And finally, whatever was accomplished in years past by asceticism is accomplished today in a pain-free, healthy, and joyful way. This is a taste of the coming Messianic times. So we can stop the share. And
Okay, now going back to the beginning of today's lesson.
yes.
Okay. Would you say that based on what we discussed today, that the donkey is an analogy for an employee or a servant also? In other words, are you obligated to help a servant that is beyond their capacity, or because they can speak and complain, you're not obligated?
Well, I think there are labor laws in Torah, and labor laws actually are specific to servants, and we can expand it from there. And one is not allowed to give someone, even busy work actually is forbidden in Torah, but more than anything that's mentally distressing or too much. So I don't know that we find it from here, because I'm following, I don't know if this is what you mean. The analogy would be that if I see someone who has been given too much by their supervisor, I have to step in and help them unload. I might be crossing a line. I don't know if I belong in that Venn diagram, but the idea is that it's certainly, if we're worried about a donkey struggling too much, we're more worried about a human being struggling too much. Yeah. So in the labor laws are pretty specific.
Question,
Yes, sir.
how many fast days are there other than the two that we just talked about?
So what we have is there are three connected to the destruction of the temple, which one is we just had a couple of weeks ago, which is the 10th of Tevis, which is found in Scripture, which is when the walls of Jerusalem were surrounded, and then in the summer, the 17th of Tammuz, which is when the walls were breached, and then Tisha B'Av was the destruction. So there's three focused on the temple. Okay, then there's Yom Kippur, which is 4. Those are all biblical at some level. In the prophets, sort of, they're all at least spoken about. One's biblical in what we call as a mitzvah. And then there are 2 fasts that the Jewish community has adopted. One is the day after Rosh Hashanah. It's called Tzom Gedalia, which is because that's to commemorate a tragedy in Babylonian times when the Jews killed a Jewish governor, and it was just so emblematic of the internal strife. And rabbis dedicated a fast to that. Although some rabbis in later generations became concerned about that, not to fast before Yom Kippur, because you want to be in better shape before Yom Kippur. So that's one that has a little bit of an asterisk. And then the day before Purim is Tainus Esther, when to remember Esther's fast.
So the 6 days haven't changed.
Again, right? Because once something's part of the Jewish program, it's hard. It's very hard to find the shoulders to be able to change something. If something is specifically tied to a situation, when I said before that Jewish law says not to take a haircut from a non-Jewish barber because they're afraid you're going to kill you, it's clearly based on some thinking. That thinking doesn't apply to today's barbers. So I don't know if anyone who's afraid to go to a non-Jewish barber. But generally, the laws, things that were ordained by the rabbis, we stick with it. There are no questions.
Thank you.
Well, have a great week. God willing, see you next week or before that at JLI.